Hello, I'm Ms.MorroccoArt, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about UDL and optimizing choice. Anywhere in this presentation that you see text is blue and underlined is a link, so feel free to click on this title here and it'll bring you right to the article that I'm referencing today. Let's talk about optimizing choice. So we're going to start with what UDL is, then answer the question why create choices, and then moving into how to actually create the choice, and lastly, managing the choices. Yeah, that's the good part. So let's talk about UDL. UDL is learning how to learn. So the goal of UDL is that all learners will become better at the process of learning itself for themselves, right? So that'll look different in each student. So if they can learn those skills, they can really learn and then teach anything as they grow, because they know their brain, they know themselves, and they'll be able to use strategies that work for them. All right, so UDL, learning how to learn. Why create choices? How is that going to help us with our process of learning, right? So two main components of this answer is minimizing barriers and then learner variability. And both of these are really strong pillars of UDL just in general. So minimizing barriers, let's start there. In UDL, we work to minimize barriers in the learning environment, like in the space, and not in the student or learner themselves. So, for example, you might hear the phrase, oh, they're just not a focused student, or that student is easily distracted, right? When in reality, something contributing to that distractibility in that student is that the environment is too stimulating. It's too loud, it's too cold, they didn't have breakfast, right? So there's all of these barriers that are prohibiting that student from doing their best learning. UDL, one of the goals is to minimize all of those barriers, most of them anyway, to help the student do their best work. Then learner variability. In addition to there being barriers to just learning itself, the action of learning can happen in a lot of different ways for students. So um, we all engage in different styles of learning, whether we really observant or not. Some people are more actively listening when they're able to fidget with something, so their hands are busy and they can concentrate on just absorbing the information, right? So people need different things and different strategies to lock in that information for them. All right. The choices also, to add on to that, the choices will increase that ability for the students to learn because they'll get to choose which style works best for them, right? So minimizing barriers, learner variability, all come together to help students learn. All right. So we talked about what UDL is, and learner variability and those minimizing those barriers, right? How do we then create meaningful choices for students? We don't want to create choice just because we can. We want to make choices that will improve the quality of learning, right? How do we do that? So first we need to have a clear goal with flexible means. That's the biggie to take away from today, right? A clear goal with flexible means. So to do that, you could either, looking at the left and the right sides of this slide, you could either start by building a lesson or using an existing lesson. Either way, you should be focusing on identifying potential barriers and brainstorming how are the students actually learning the skill, right? Maybe you already know from an existing lesson, but there might be another way to do it. Maybe looking at it with fresh eyes, you could come up with more ideas, right? So then moving into the center, do you have an engaging topic? Can you provide more variables to let the students choose their own adventure as they're working through to reach that goal? Can you change the subject matter, the representation of knowledge, the timeline, time of day that they're working on it, who is helping them? Are they working by themselves, with a partner, with a small group? So there's lots of ways that you could switch it up and allow for more choice. But in the end, you want a clear goal with flexible means. What does that look like? So here's an example. This goal says the teacher wants the students to create a Venn diagram comparing plants and animals. So on the surface, just looking at it, it looks like a pretty simple goal, not super complicated. It, fits the learning target that they want, where you want students to be. However, if you dive into it a little bit deeper, you'll notice that this is actually two separate goals that have been squished together. So here's the question. Do you want students to learn how to make and use a Venn diagram? Or do you want students to understand the differences between plants and animals? Which one is the priority here? Is it the Venn diagram or the comparison? Which one do you want? Because hypothetically, you could break this into two separate goals. So students can make a Venn diagram and you're changing the subject matter. That's the choice. What do you want your Venn diagram to be about? Sports, weather, family members, pop culture, something they're excited about, right? And they can learn how to create a Venn diagram with whatever subject they choose, or they could compare plants and animals by drawing pictures of them and labeling them. They could write paragraphs about the differences and similarities. They could give a speech and talk about their dog versus their house plant, right? So there are a lot of ways that students could compare plants and animals without it being like a specific Venn diagram. So here's another more specific example. So if you wanted your students to write an essay about the causes of the Civil War, there's my next question again, right? Is the goal the essay or is the goal learn the causes of the Civil War? Which one is the priority, right? So this goal already has the means embedded. The means are the essay, right? You're assigning them an essay about the causes of the Civil War, when in reality, you could take away that means, the essay, and just ask them to prove their understanding of the causes of the Civil War. The choice is theirs on how they're going to prove that understanding, right? So there's a couple more examples here. Find evidence in a text to support an argument. Is that one a clear goal with the flexible means, or does it have the means embedded? One more. Create a dance for the song's celebration and show rhythm in music. Clear goal, flexible means, or means embedded? Lastly, how do we manage all these choices, right? So we know we need to make a clear goal with flexible means. We know to do that. But once we provide all these choices and the flexibility, how do we actually walk the students through that process? So firstly, let's just go through this kind of flow chart here. Number one, up here in the corner, I would suggest explaining to the students why you're offering the choice, right? And you can use yourself as an example. I like to draw pictures. I think that I can use art to show my learning really well. So I want you to have that opportunity too. So here's a choice that you could make to draw a picture to show me how you learned X, Y, Z, right? So having that conversation really puts the power in their hands, right? You're saying, here you go, I trust you to show me that you got this, right? Moving down to number two, discuss options and expectations with students and then predict any barriers. You could also create a plan of action for each type of learner. So if you have three choices, you might create like a step 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for each of your choices. That's possible if you want students to have a more structured guide on how to get to the goal. If it's more like fluid and they're kind of navigating on their own to get to the goal, you could just discuss some ideas with them. Maybe they could break off into small groups and you could have them brainstorm together. Okay, we all made this choice that we're going to write a paragraph or we're going to draw a poster. How are we going to make that? What are we going to do? What do we need to make sure that we reach this goal of proving we learned this by making a poster, right? Moving on to number three, provide a model or example for successful outcomes of all choices, right? So if you have an example of a poster, of a movie, and of a written example, then they can see, okay, this is what we're going for. This is my goal, right? That's also UDL, providing a visual example as well as auditorily saying it or writing it down, right? That's another UDL strategy. Moving down to number 4, use a universal rubric to assess learning. This is important because you're assessing the same skill in all students. Even though they're making all these choices on how they're going to prove their learning, they're all learning the same skill, right? So if you're making rubrics for each individual choice, that's going to take a lot of time, and then you're not really assessing the students in the same way and the same level, right? So this is also a link here on number 4. You can click that to a guide on how to create a universal rubric. Moving up to number 5, as students work, check in with progress and problem solving. You do this already. They're going to run into problems, they're going to ask questions, you're going to do your best to guide them back onto the path and answer whatever you can. You already do that. Number 6, reflect on learning at the end. Students can make changes to reach the goal, right? So you get there, you did it, awesome. How did it go? This is a great opportunity for students to reflect on what choices they made based on what you offered, and then consider what they would do next time. Or maybe they want to make some changes because they're really close, but they feel like they could do a little bit more, right? So you give them an opportunity to soak up that choice, right? And really let it resonate and think, okay, how am I going to do this next time? Am I going to make changes, or am I going to stick to what I did this time? Did it work for me? That's going to help really solidify that skill of understanding their own learning. Lastly, number 7, just make sure that all students have access to all the choices, right? You want an even playing field. This quote kind of got cut off, so I'll just read it aloud. These learning choices are the perfect time for students to practice self-awareness, to navigate the learning environment and make it usable, right? Just like I was saying before. It's going to sink in when you give them a little bit more time to reflect on how their learning progressed through this task. Lastly, another quote I really liked. What you do before anyone makes a choice is the most critical to making sure students are successful, right? So steps 1 through 4 are just prep. They're just set up before the students actually start making the choices and doing the work. The more you can provide context and ideas and conversations about what they're going to do, what they could do, the better equipped they'll be to actually make those choices and sink their teeth into their learning, right? All right, so summary. Just a brief little summary of what we've been over and how to get started on it. I would definitely start with making a clear goal with flexible means. If you don't do anything else, try that. See what happens. This last couple slides is just some tools and resources. So if you're feeling overwhelmed on how to get started, these are some things that I think were really helpful for me. And these first 2 here under creating a plan that I've highlighted yellow are videos of a teacher actually teaching in this style, like actually going through the steps. And it is super cool to watch her teach and watch how the students are engaging with the lesson. It's really exciting. So highly recommended. Yeah, and just some more cool resources that I thought were helpful. Lastly, here's a chart about offering choice that comes directly from the UDL website. So if you would like some more specific questions that you can actually answer as you're working through creating that lesson plan, this might be really helpful for you. So if you're not sure how to offer choice, this first one says choices for engagement, right? So can you do text, topics, relevant problems? What order can I work on the tasks, right? So all of those might be helpful if you're not really sure where to start. All right, so I hope that this was a helpful presentation. I'm looking forward to hearing about how your UDL experience is going. And if you need some ideas or just want to sit down and work on it together, I would be happy to help you. And I can also refer you to any of the other UDL team members. All right, thanks so much for watching.